Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's show, Gemini Rising. I'm Anne Wolke, and I'm here with the lovely Natalie Sadie and our special guest today, Frankie Urbano, who is Frankie from Frankie's Tarot. Welcome.
Yay.
So we brought you on today because we want to talk all about your intuitive side, what it's like to operate and produce a successful tarot channel, and your healing journey. What we'd like to hear about what brought you to where you are today. And of course, we have many other Gemini type questions to pepper you with today. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Because we need to know everything about everything, because that is the Gemini rising way.
Well, I am a Scorpio with stellium in house 3 and Gemini South Node. So I have a lot of that Gemini influence as well. So, and
She's already done this. She's been a Gemini.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that kind of explains even my life too. Like I've always connected with people and I've done so much in my life. I've always been, exploring and trying new things and getting certified in this, doing that. And just kind of like that ADHD of the zodiac, but you bring all those things together. And I think that's how my life has been. And that's what I brought to my channel. And so it's like it all came together and that's not the end of the road. My channel is just, a stepping stone, I think. It's just another thing I'm doing. But it pieces together everything that I've done. And through the readings, I'm able to use all the experiences I've been through. Mm-hmm. That's kind of Gemini-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the first things that I always think of when I speak to people that have gifts, and especially when they share them with the world, at what point did you know that you had these gifts and were able to tap into them? Was it something from childhood? Was it something that developed as you got older? When did that recognition first happen for you?
In hindsight, as I'm connecting all the dots in the past few years, it started young, but I don't think I was aware of it. I just always followed it. I was somebody that followed. I had to, I was just with my childhood alone. I had to take care of myself, and I was sort of a survivor. So you learn to trust your intuition. You learn to connect with people. You learn to find people in your life. And in hindsight, if you look at all the places I went and all the people I met and all the things that I ended up getting into, even at a young age, all was spiritual, all was connected to this healing journey, even down to, we talked about even being a Catholic when I was younger, connecting with the nuns, connecting with God, connecting with, in teenage years, connecting with crystals, connecting with music and even drugs, just connecting and going down this path, of transformation, that it's like, I would say 13, 14, I bought my first tarot deck. But I was like you all in Generation X, we were all curious. Astrology, you have a book, you have Linda Goodman's book, you have, my first deck was Russian tarot. And there was another regular Rider-Waite deck that I bought. I cannot find it for the life of me, but I was attached to the Russian tarot. And that is when, but it was just a thing to do. It was a thing to have. But I think all of us on this path have at some point kept collecting these little things, but they were just, I don't know, we didn't think much of it. But I do have in my family, my grandmother is an astrologer. Well, she was trying to be an astrologer, and she was a tarot reader, and she taught my mother at a young age. And so when I was 13 and brought home a deck, my mom was like, oh, I love, she's all bragging, I did tarot too. And, but it all just kind of linked together. And in my journey, I would call myself nomadic by nature. And, I was always dabbling in everything. So it wasn't until probably in my early 30s that I started to have the actual awakening experiences that I knew something else was happening. So it was later on that I was able to look at it and go, wow, this is why. And, now I embrace the gifts or embrace the intuition.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell by me moving the camera? All of a sudden I moved like, I have to say something. I have to say something. I love that Frankie, if she is such a third house Scorpio, that she just dove right in. She's talking about her experience, but it's like intense already. Don't you feel like?
Always like
But I was thinking as you were talking about your grandma having done tarot also.
yeah.
It's really interesting because as you talked about how you had a tarot deck, you had this Russian tarot, and I had a tarot deck that was something. I had my mythic tarot that I love that I've talked about, but I think I had the Rider-Waite also. I know, Natalie, didn't you have tarot decks early on as well?
No,
Or
I actually didn't. I was
Mhm.
fascinated by tarot, and even now I'm more comfortable reading my oracle cards and doing that. And so I have a whole bunch of tarot decks,
Mhm.
but I feel that before I do any of my tarot publicly, I have more work to do. It's just, whereas an oracle deck I can pick up and I know very quickly whether I connect or not. So the tarot for me is a journey, but I am obsessed with knowing more about it and hearing from
Mhm.
other people, because obviously we get pulled in the directions that we're meant to. But this is why I was so excited about having Frankie, because I need to know
Yeah.
all.
Well, I was just thinking about how I know when I was younger and had the tarot deck, it was really weird, wasn't it? A lot of people were interested in things like the paranormal or psychic intuition, all of that. But to have a tarot deck was like a different level of a lot of people. If you were raised around a lot of people who were Christian, a lot of people looked at that as, no, you can't read cards. You shouldn't do that. But for you to have a grandmother who did it also, was it something that she had hid from you, or was it anything that you felt strange about when you first had your first deck of tarot, or
No,
or what, your friends just kind of accepted it and you read their cards, or how did that work?
I don't think we looked at it like that back then. Like, I would read cards. Like, I did it like I would, it seemed like every year or every couple years, I was always buying a deck whenever I was going through something in my life. And I would just sit there and do like a little spread. The way we're supposed to do tarot. You're supposed to do a reading and then let it play out. And then, but we're so used to now doing readings all the time that we're not even thinking for ourselves anymore, or letting things play out. And so it wasn't odd. It wasn't, but I wasn't connected to my family that much growing up. I was the misfit. I was the I didn't think anybody was ever like paying attention to that kind of stuff. It was just part of being a kid, or being a teenager. And like I said, I mean, I was into art. I was, we a lot of the like hippie stuff and things like that, and just that kind of lifestyle. So it didn't seem weird, and I didn't look at it. And like, let me just back up a sec. I was raised a Catholic, and to some degree, like our Catholic, it seemed like everybody was really Catholic around the holidays, one of those things. But it's there was always this place in my heart, like I was always connected to God, you know what I mean? And I always felt, but I never understood not being able to talk to, you have to go to a priest to talk to. I'm like, and so I connected through the cards sometimes, and my own intuition. And I always looked at it like that. I didn't look at it like it was some weird spiritual against, I never saw anything wrong with it. I never understood that, and I didn't get that impression from the people I was around. I never felt that. It wasn't until nowadays, as I got older, that, all of a sudden I was almost kind of, when I first started my channel, I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of people that were like, oh, that's weird stuff, or they wouldn't say anything about it. But like the credibility, so I think nowadays more people are kind of looking at it like, and when we were younger, I don't know. I didn't get that impression. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a theory, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on this. When I talk to a lot of people who are in the spiritual realms, they all talk about their childhood, and a lot of them, not all, and myself included, we have trauma in our childhood and in our younger years. And even a lot of the books that I've read of mediums, psychics, all these different people that have gifts, they all talk about these traumas that they had to go through. And I'm not taking anything away from people who are young and doing tarot or working as mediums or anything like that. But how important do you think it is to have life experience when you're doing spiritual work like this? Do you think that helps add to the levels of understanding and the manner in which the messages are able to be delivered? Or do you think it's irrelevant because if you're getting the information, you're getting the information?
I think if you're drawn to tarot or you're drawn to any healing modality, I don't think you have to go through so much to get there. You're just being called to go there. So we all can tap into the knowledge. It's just how we get there. So I wouldn't, I don't, I think, I want to be careful how I answer this, because with trauma and having a very scorpionic background, and I have gone through a lot of trauma. I could check almost all, boxes. I have this level of depth and experience that I can almost feel instantly into things when they're happening, and I can see the different levels of things. So, and plus with all the healing I've had, I can tell what layer I'm on and what I'm bringing through. So I can look at things from different surfaces. I often find sometimes people who haven't gone through a lot, they're very, like I said, trauma's trauma. What's trauma to me and what's trauma to somebody else, we may have been affected a certain way if we have different lifestyle upbringings and stuff like that. I might be able to handle more than somebody else did, but their response to their trauma could have been the same as my response to the trauma. And so I do believe that as well too. But I think there's people that are book healers. You know what I mean? Like they get the information from the book. They'll talk about chakras. They'll talk about, different realms, but have they really experienced it? And I think that I can sense that in other people, but the thing is my journey has taught me not to judge another person's level of where they're at. They're still on the path. They're still being connected or called to it. So they'll have to learn something to get to the next level. So it's just, we're all on different levels of it.
Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit about your own past and how you've had to work through your own healing. So I wondered if you would share a little bit about the kinds of things that you faced when you were younger and how that, I guess younger as a child, a young adult, what are the sorts of things that you faced that set you on the sort of scorpionic ascension path?
Yeah. I know, it's wild. When that whole thing with the people who have strong Scorpio placements, every Scorpio I've met really have had to go through some major transformation. You're never the same Scorpio, and that's the truth. We all have Scorpio in us, right? But that part of you, it's when I was a child, we moved a lot. moved more than the average family. And obviously we had a split family, and I ended up just not having a place there, and I ended up getting taken out of the home at a certain point. So I was around 14, was independent, taken out of the house, independent. So my family has grown so much over the years. Everybody has their shit. We're from Generation X. Our parents raised us differently than we raised our kids now, right? And so, but I did win a scholarship in high school due to my autobiography by the time I was a senior in high school. So I had to endure a lot of bullying, a lot of moving, a lot of, some of the things we deal with when we drink too much, go to a party, I've experienced things like that. But it was freshman year, the biggest thing that led, that I will talk about, was alcohol poisoning. And we got pulled over, and we drank so much that night. I was only 14, and the cops pulled us over, and they opened up the door, and they told us to get out. And apparently I threw up all over the cop. And I have cops in my family. I love cops, right? But apparently I just threw up, and he backed up, and I landed flat on my face. And I was out for a few days in a alcohol-induced coma. And so it took a few months to heal from that. And the reason why I'm discussing that is because it was after high school, I went to college, and it just seemed like, I had all that childhood trauma. Then I went to college and thought I had my life path set up for me. All right. So then I'm in college, and then I can't handle college. I leave college, and then I go and I go through another part of my life, and I have more trauma that keeps building up, right? I don't know how to talk about my trauma so much, right? But there just seemed like every cycle of my life, there was some big trauma that happened. But when I was in my early 20s, at that point, I've had therapy. I always found myself going to a therapist or a guide, and throughout high school, I always had to be connected to my school therapist and things like that. So I always had good people that were always helping me through all my trauma. So if you were to look at my life, look at my past life, I always look at it like, how did I accomplish so much? But at the same time, you can see all the stuff I was going through. It looked like two different people, right? So I always had resources, but I was always getting hurt, and I had all this trauma going on at the same time. But I was able to survive, and sort of the healing throughout even my younger years was keeping me in alignment somehow. I don't know how or why, because if you look at the things I had gone through, and then winning the scholarship, going to college, and doing all this other stuff, it didn't make sense. But later on, I like in my early 20s, I don't know what drew me, but something drew me. It was after my grandmother died, and we had quite a few things that happened, and I had gone through several traumas by that point. I was called to go to a massage therapist, and I went to a massage therapist, and she, without asking me, and I was so mad at this lady because I knew she did something. You talk about intuition and knowing. I'm a feeler. I'm an energy worker. And she did something in therapy. She was putting her hands all over my head, and I had a meltdown. She was doing craniosacral therapy on me. She didn't tell me at the time that she was doing it. She just felt intuitively called. And that's where I had gotten hit when I was a kid, which is why I said that, gave you one idea of one of my traumas. And I ended up getting sick for a few days. I called her up. What did you do to me? Blah, 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 blah. She was like, just come back in. And that, from that point, is what got me. And that was like in 2003 or 4. That's what opened my eyes to energy healing and the body healing. And that started the next chapter of my life, then going back and healing some of the stuff that happened to me as a child. So I don't know what you can get out of that. Without getting too descriptive of all of my traumas, that's how I got to this point. That was the beginning of when you would ask, Natalie, when did you notice? When did you know? that's when that all happened.
I feel like we could go in 10 different directions, but I want to touch on the bullying that you talked about. And I ask about that because I was bullied as a child. I was bullied through school for a whole bunch of reasons. And then I've done reality TV. And so then the online bullying, which wasn't a thing when I was at school, at least when I was growing up, you could leave school and go home. And I mean, home for me wasn't my favorite place to be, but it was better than being at school. But so you could kind of go there and shut the door. And then obviously with everything being online, now we've got to deal with cyber bullies and things that come up. And I mean, you've got your very successful YouTube channel, and you get people in the comments constantly. I don't think it matters what you do. There are people that are going to write hateful things. So how did you deal with that when you were younger? And I mean, how do you deal with it now?
Well, that's what made me a fighter. We moved every year, sometimes twice or three times a year. And I got shifted around a lot of places, and everywhere, every school I went to, I was this little teeny geek, little nerd. I'm sorry if I use these words and people don't like them, but that's what I was. And I was the little know-it-all in the back of the class, but I was always the new kid. And that got me in trouble every single time. And I got chased. It was just picked on. I mean, brutally picked on, even in first grade, second grade, people making fun of me. Eighth grade was the worst. We went from like a nice town to, like, I always used to say, like Beverly Hills to Compton, right? We moved to this really rough town, and I went into that school, and my accent triggered somebody. And next thing you know, and my mother will always, this is one of the things that she does remember. My mother had come out of the house one time, and I was being chased by like 14 girls, just wanting to beat the crap out of me. And I would come out of class, my head slammed against the door. I mean, this was just from me, my accent, you know. And but I don't know what happened that year. I have a really good friend that came into my life that year, and she was some tough chick from another town. And she just, for some reason, just be hanging out with her, I had built this reputation that I was a badass somehow. I don't know what happened. And I have gotten in fights in the past, right? And it looked like I was winning, but I promise you, somebody broke up the fight just before I was about to lose, but it always looked like I was going to win. So somebody was watching out for me. And then I just learned to fight back. And then in high school, this is where I changed my personality, though. I went from being that kind of, very studious, very competitive, very to like a partier, to like the art, to like the grunge, and I just became this tough girl, and but I had to fight. I've had to fight several times throughout my life. And I also had to fight in a relationship with domestic violence as well, too. And I'm tough. I'm strong. And, you learn the hard way. And that was another one of my traumas, too, and later on. And but then I went in and I started learning how to fight. So I took some martial arts, taught myself how to fight. But I have such a thick skin. There's nothing I can... It might hurt deep within, but I will sit there with a game face on, and I've been just beat up, hurt too much to I see it, and I'm just like like anybody. Nobody likes to hear it. Nobody wants to be bullied, but you can't. I could somewhere I learned that I have this thing inside me. I'll just take you down. I'm not afraid anymore. There's no fear. And it's kind of scary to some degree, but there is no fear. Like I always say to myself, could I take her? Could I take him? Even though I wouldn't nowadays, because I won't go to jail for anybody. That's one thing I won't do. But I ask myself that. And usually my higher self's like, oh, you could. That's how I do it.
Do you know what your human design is?
Projector.
Do you know the type? What numbers?
5'3", I think. Yeah, the martyr and the in the
Is it the high?
That it's the I have 3 too. It's the one where you have to experience. Is it the
Oh yes,
experience or
yes. So
something?
I have to experience like it's wild. I've had
Mhm.
to experience so many things in my life to understand. And so most people say you have to learn the hard way. Well, I don't know any other way. Like I could read all the information and then you could ask me, what did you learn anything? And I could no, but if I experience it, I can tell you all about it. I just
Yeah.
have to.
Experience is the toughest teacher. I definitely have that too, but
Yeah.
not quite as really hardcore as your experience. I feel like you really had a lot to process and to transmute already at a young age.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about in today's world, people do get bullied, right? And you could be bullied at school and have a pack of 14 girls coming at you. And actually, this is not something that gets talked about a lot, I think. We don't talk about um, the way girls bully girls, and also, though, how a girl can decide to be tough and decide that you can take on everybody and to go and learn how to fight and learn how to fight your battles in that way, but also by being open to help, right? Because you were always open to people coming to assist you.
Yeah.
But today, it's like, imagine if that comes home with you too, where it's social media bullying as well.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't imagine that. But I wonder at the time when people were coming into your life, whether these were nuns or a friendly next door neighbor or a family friend or whoever it was, at the time, did you feel that that was some sort of divine intervention, or how did you process it at the time?
Yeah, I did. I have this, I just trust. I either trust you or I don't. I, um, I always seem to have a group of people. It was always the community who always had my back. And I always just knew how to go find somebody, whether it was little Emma next door, the old lady who taught me how to play piano when I was little. I mean, I can't play. I tried again later on in life, but, uh, I just, I always think of the movie My Girl when she would always around. You remember that movie? Well, that's kind of me. I was always exploring. Even the cops knew me, and everybody knew me. Everybody just knew who I was, and and I was always being guided. I was always being protected in some way. I knew it. I knew it, and yet I was always getting hurt in other ways. So it was like a double life. It was the weirdest thing. And so I remember when I was younger too, often saying, I'm gonna write a book someday. Like there's gotta be a reason why this is happening. And I could turn over. Like I have this turnover rate, like this tuck and roll that I don't even know where I got it from. But it's like I fall in a ditch, I get back up, and I'm just like this resilience is unbelievable. Sometimes I'm like, I think it's crazy how resilient I am. And I mean, I've stood in front of therapists, I've stood, and they've just looked at me and they're like, but so to me, on a higher level, like there's just this knowing that I had guides and then I had the experience. And it's almost like I signed up. So there's a part of me that's like, we do sign up for certain things when we come in. I mean, we can look at, there's so many different avenues you can go in the spiritual world. And that is one of them that I still fight with. I'm like, did I sign up for this? Because it seemed like I knew when I was even a kid. I knew something, but didn't know. And now I'm piecing it all together. Did that
Yeah.
answer the question?
Yeah.
Someone in the chat was saying the martyr and the heretic. Is that what?
Yes, that's what martyr and heretic.
Yeah. So I ask about the human design. So I'm a 4/6, but so being a 6, I have the 3 in me as well. And my bullying was different to yours, but I feel like there are a lot of similarities in our story. And you're right. The only way I learn, like I read a lot, I'm always reading, but they have to be books that I enjoy. If you give me something dry to read to learn something, Absolutely not. You show me or you let me do, completely different. Like I get right in there and it changes everything. Somebody else was also saying that the 3 gets easier as you get older.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm making the assumption that it's because as we get older and we've experienced so much, that experience makes our experimentation moving forward, we're smarter in the decisions we make
Yeah.
because we have that life experience behind us.
I agree.
So when you were obviously doing readings and things when you were younger, and you would do them for friends, yes, or were you
Myself.
only doing them for yourself?
So yeah, myself. I've done them for friends. I've done them for some family members, you know. And like I said, this wasn't often. This was just like I'd always. The other thing is, I never read the tarot book. I never read the tarot book. I just would. I knew the Celtic spread, and I would pull the cards out. And I loved. This is the real way to do tarot, to me, in my experience. And I would just know, and I would know, I would look at the whole gist of it, and I would know what's it. Usually when I was going through a kind of a bad situation, I wanted to see, you know, how things were going to pan out and where the outcome, and it would always come through, and I would leave it alone. I would sit on that reading for a while. I wouldn't sit there and pull my cards every day like we do now with YouTube. And I pulled reading on my sister one time, on my brother one time, and they both come back and said, "Oh yeah, you were right." You know, it's something that they said. But I didn't look at it like I was predicting something. I was just reading it and went with the flow, and it came out the right way. So there is something about my trust for it, my trust for the initial message that I get. And so YouTube has changed that, though, because with YouTube you have to. It's just there's just a whole different world when it comes to tarot, I think, with YouTube. But so I didn't read basically like I do now. And I never would have looked at it back then like I would have made something for it or did something for it. I didn't even look at it like that. I never even saw a future with it. And honestly, before I started my tarot channel, I found myself more into manifesting, and I started my first channel was on manifesting. You know, because that's the other thing with tarot. I see tarot through the eyes of that lens as well too, manifesting and a reflection of what's going on within us, and it's more of a tool. So I don't see it as some spooky thing that people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see this tarot movie.
Right. Well, just wait until they see the new movie, then we'll see what people think after that. But for when you say manifesting, that you became interested in manifesting, that was your first channel. But how did you get into that? I know some of the books that you've suggested on your channel and some of the things you've told me to read, but did it start with like the Florence Shovel?
No.
I think her name, or was it someone else?
No. And so this is where it's so weird, because like all the pieces kind of pieced together in my life, but I've always known, but didn't know that I was a manifest, like we manifest. Mm-hmm. Like I used to always call it pardon of the Red Seas, right? It was just my favorite thing to say in my head. I would say to myself, I want something, I know I want it, and I know what the feeling feels like to be in the flow. And I would make things happen and make huge shifts in my life. And it was one of those things too, is like, I've been traveling I said, a very nomadic life. If I'm going, people get so weirded out, but they're like, oh, you're just going to up and leave. Look at here, she goes again, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm like, I just trust in the flow. So I know, and I've seen manifestations happen for me quickly. And then there was, the awakening that happened. First was physical with craniosacral therapy, which is, I thought we were going to go down that path. That's why I brought that up, but we went in a different direction.
Sorry, that was my fault.
Go back.
No, I want to go back to it. We
but
have
there's so
time.
there's so many different directions. That's why, I mean, we're doing a great job here. Honestly, there's so many different directions you can go with what I know. But the manifestation, my last awakening during just pre-COVID, I was becoming a Reiki master. And I don't know. I had a lot of I was astro projecting. My dreams were wild. My dreams have always been very wild since I was a little kid, very wild. But something happened during that time period, and I found myself watching Neville Goddard, and I saw myself seeing all these techniques everybody was doing, and I got obsessed. This is that scorpionic obsession, and I was doing all this mind power. Oh my God, I was like, what am I doing here? But I had to go through this obsession that people are going through with the manifesting techniques. I had to go down every avenue so that I could teach it through the cards, right? Because it was weird. Like there's so many different ways to look at manifesting. But all the way to just come back to, I was doing this before all this, but I had to see everybody thinks manifesting is a technique or a tool or this, and that. And these are just tools to help you understand what we're already doing, but how to actually make it work for you. And I naturally did it before. And now that's why I'm immersed, like even the cards will, if you understand what's going on within your mind and the stories you're telling yourself, your cards, your spread will show you in the current energy what you're telling yourself, especially if you're resonating with it, especially, if you're seeing, but you can see and use it to help you stay in the flow, and everything's a possibility, right? And so this is where quantum physics and all that comes in too. Anything's possible. So there's no whens or predictions with tarot, but it can show you a timeline you're on according to what you're flowing with, what you're believing. And as soon as you start to switch your own beliefs, your tarot spreads will show up differently for you. I see it all the time in the energy shifts, even when I'm doing personal readings too, even when I'm doing readings for myself. I can tell when I've shifted a story or shifted a timeline through it. So manifesting is very, very important to me, but it all works together. It all works together. Okay.
No, I had about 20 questions go through my head while you were talking, and then I thought, I think it's Natalie's turn to talk. So
No,
I'm
go for it. Ask one of the questions, please.
So, okay, so you could actually do a tarot spread then, and you could test out. You can look at what are my potential energetic paths, right?
Yeah,
and what are the energetic resources around me?
Yes, I believe so. And I do it for all. That's how I do. Sometimes I just I don't sit. Like I said, I didn't learn tarot by studying every single card, every single book. I am a feeler. I'm a clear cognizant, right? So I just am knowing and feeling. And, if the mental expansion for me came 2018, 19 is when I had that, like, boom, like it just, something else woke up. But yes, I do. So when I pull cards for myself, sometimes I will just lay out some cards and I will feel into what it feels like it's doing, right? And then I can sometimes zone in and say, oh, this is here, or what's the, you know what I mean? Like it'll tell me something different. Going back to human design, I worked with a human. She was on my channel, actually, one of my friends, and she was telling me, the spleen is where my intuition comes. That's with the projector where I'm at, and instantly my intuition happens instantly. If I second guess it, which is why also we're fast talkers too, and you kind of have to go with what's coming through, because that's it. You start trying to think too much and second guess it, now that's your ego coming and going, you got to go with what comes first. And so sometimes I don't just sit there and go, oh, the 8 of Cups, what's this mean to me? You know what I mean? It all comes together as one piece, and that's your message.
Do you remember the messages that you give? And I ask because I do my oracle readings on High Vibe. I sometimes remember a theme. So I know that the last reading I did, it was all about closing chapters, walking through doors. I have no idea what I say when
Yeah.
it's over. I always message Anne because she is my amazing person that does all the technical things for me. But I'll message her and say, did I just ramble? And she'll say, no, that was a great message and it resonated with so many people and what have you. But I don't remember a single word that I say when I'm done.
Nope, that's perfect. Nope, you're not. I don't think you're supposed to.
Mhm.
I don't think that's too much information for us to have to even. I don't even go back and listen to myself either, because we'll judge ourselves. And the thing is in every moment, something is meant to be said. And if somebody's picking up on that exact message you're saying, that is what they needed to hear at that time. There's no wrong message. Everything shows up. If you believe in, people call us in too. You came and you needed to hear something, right? And sometimes when we're doing our cards, the stories will switch and it changes into something else because something else might need to hear something. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no scripting it out. You cannot script a reading, so you don't know where it's going to go, and you can't judge yourself for it. What happens because I do so many readings that I do eventually, it's like another layer. So you'll start to build your own layer where you will remember something you said. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, Libra, like just example, Sagittarius and Libra have been coming up a lot lately in my reads, or Gemini was going through, certain things one month. And I was like, oh yeah, it's connected. Now I can see I'll make those upper layer connections. Right. But I won't remember everything, but I will start to see how it's a pattern too. We're all in a flow. We're all in a pattern. And no matter what, before I started even getting really into astrology is hard for me to take in 100%. I got to take it into bits and pieces. And I took an astrology school in 2018, and I know basic, and then with talking with Anne and getting more into the evolutionary part of it, right? It was weird before I started doing that. The energy I was picking up in my readings were resonating with the energies that the real, astrologers were saying. So we're all in it. We're all here. We're all living in this layer together. So you're going to hear it through the messages. And it comes down to, who likes your voice, who likes your story, who likes your vibe, who likes however you say or deliver it. But I think we're all on the same timeline.
Mm-hmm.
How advanced do you feel you are with astrology? Because you reference it quite a bit in your readings, which I loved. I was like, oh, I didn't realize she was so into astrology as well.
I would say I would put myself like when my friend Jojo says, he says, I'm enough to cause a little bit of damage with the basic. So, but it's hard for me yet. I feel like it's starting to click. When let me give you an example. I go into a class. By the end, at the beginning, I remember, I'm going to use craniosacral for a second. I remember the teacher walking up to me and I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And he's looking at me and I could feel I was doing everything the way I was supposed to do it right out the gate. He was like, you're doing it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Right. But by the very end, after so many years of doing all this practicing and absorbing everything, all of a sudden it just clicked. All the information just clicked, and then boom, I level up. And I'm like, but I knew what I was doing and I could sense it and feel it, but I couldn't explain it. So I don't know why it takes forever for me to take the actual, see the whole bigger picture. It's like I'm building from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden at one point it'll all come together. So there'll be times when I can really pick up on some of the astrology. And Anne and I listen to her talk so much about it that it will start to naturally come through in my readings because it's meant to, something she said to me, because we are seeing through our own lens and what we're taking in as well. But I won't put myself out there as knowing. I'll always say I'm a child. I'll be like, I'm just, because I just, there's room for messing up too much. I don't know enough that I could be like, this is, I don't know. I like to be credible.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think when you know a little bit of astrology and you're also kind of intuitively picking up on the energy, that you also know there's so much more to know.
Yes.
So that I mean, I would never put myself out there to say, oh, I'm an astrologer. I mean, there are people who do,
Yeah.
and okay, they took one class and they're out there. And
Yeah.
I could never do that because I see the big picture. I think that's kind of the layers that you're talking about. There are those layers of leveling up. And I think for me also, because I learned through experience as well. And I mean, for me, I'm the type of person where, for me, from when I learned tarot, I really loved the book. I loved going through the book. We talked about this on a High Vibe show also. I loved going through the book and trying to learn, and then looking in the book and keep going back and like the Celtic spread, right? Number card number 1 and 2, right? I would go back like, well, what's this card again? And then finally one day it clicks for me. Like this is how I learn, where I'm trying so hard, like pedaling a bicycle uphill or whatever, like just I can't get it, I can't memorize it all. And then finally, if you let go and you intuitively realize, oh, I know it. It's like you're opposite from me, the way that you knew intuitively, and then you're picking up the pieces.
Yeah.
Or in craniosacral. And I want us to go back to that because I actually didn't really even know what that therapy was until recently. So I'd actually love it if you talk a bit about what is craniosacral therapy, and then you could tell us the fact that you actually you
Yeah.
were a massage therapist and you also learned that. And then maybe talk about your experience of learning it, because I think you approached that first intuitively. That's how I connected to that.
Yeah. That if you have a lot of trauma, if you have a lot of trauma, you gotta go to craniosacral therapy. I wasn't ready to talk. Talk therapy wasn't for me. It was, I just repressed everything. And when you repress everything, you store it in your body. And craniosacral therapy is a very light touch therapy where as a therapist, it's like 5 grams of pressure and you barely feel us touching you, but with our intention and we're following the rhythm, the rhythm of your body. There's a craniosacral rhythm, and there's so many dimensions to this therapy, but that's basic and follows the rhythm of the craniosacral fluid, and obviously from the movements of your cranium all the way down to your sacrum. Your whole body moves, right? And so if you think about having a wound, you kind of say you broke your hip. Well, there's a trauma right there. It changes the ripple in your whole rhythm of your tissue, right? And so it'll twist. There's a physical aspect of it. It'll twist your body will heal from that, and it'll twist. Your body will conform to it because your body wants to be in homeostasis. It wants to be balanced. And so with craniosacral, you have really good therapists, works with the tissue in your body and helps your body unwind that wound, even in an energetic level too, not just the tissue level. And this is where the intuitive part comes in. And when I learned Reiki, I learned that I was doing Reiki as well too when I was doing craniosacral. And you can sync. My sons will tell you, my older son especially, he'll tell the story. He felt one time he thought I had my hands on his kidneys, right? Because I can sink that low. You can sink into somebody's body when you're at this light of a pressure, and then you get to where the point of the resistance is, and then that's where the body makes change, and it'll loosen up and unwind the wound. And it's these energy cysts too, like the phantom arm or something, like these things like that. Well, you actually have that energy ball around the wound that you have, and it's stored with a bunch of emotions. So if you think the very moment you were in that trauma, you had an emotion in that moment that, whether you blacked out or whether it was so traumatic or whatever, you stored it in there, and that has to be released. And people can sometimes release it with just a sigh, but sometimes people will cry. I mean, I rolled off a table. I went through what was called a biological process, where it was like I was being reborn in a sense through the canal. And my whole body, I had a lot of therapists working on me. but it's just a tissue release. It's very deep therapeutic work. And you don't have to relive trauma. So if you go through talk therapy and you've had a lot of trauma, any kind of, we know trauma that we, can go through. And if you're not ready to talk or process, and I wasn't somebody that I wasn't from a family where we talked or processed. We just don't. It's basically, oh, it's just another thing we've been through. Let's move on. I needed this physical therapy. I needed to release all that. And I didn't have to go into the visuals or the images of what happened to me. I didn't have to relive it, but I knew it. When I knew it, when I'm in that deep zone, it was, I am releasing. I know exactly what I'm releasing, and I don't have to go down that avenue. Whereas people are afraid to deal with their traumas because they don't want to sit there and tell somebody exactly what they went through or have to go back to that moment. And you don't have to do that with craniosacral. And after every session I ever had, I remember I was working with a chiropractor. He'd look at me, he'd be like, you look totally different. And I was. You process for months. Sometimes it takes a long time to process. You don't even know. I could still be in a process, years later. Still the energy unraveling, my tissue unraveling. But you change. You transform, you change. And I believe I had to go through 5 years of that before I went to the mental expansion that I went through, and part of the spiritual awakening for me. I had too many blocks. I had too much trauma stored.
Do you think, so I think I talked about it in one of the oracle readings, but I was all about talk therapy, because for me, and that's probably my Gemini rising, Gemini moon, and needing to sit there and think about it all and go through it all and have it make sense, or find a way for certain things to make sense within my own brain. But one of the other things that I was doing probably at the same time was I was doing a lot of yin yoga. And again, it's about opening the fascia and opening the joints and releasing the physical trauma that is held in the body. And I may or may not have dated the person who ran the studio. And so I would always turn up with a flock of people behind me going, we have to let them into the class. And he was like, okay. And I would say to them, this one's going through this one's going through that. And he was like, okay. And with one of my girlfriends, when she was really releasing so much, he would find us in Shavasana and I would be holding her hand.
Yeah.
We wouldn't talk. I would just put my hand out. She would sort of hear it next to her and she would reach out, and that was sort of us connecting. But so do you see the power or the help that something like yin yoga can do, because you're holding that space and opening the fascia or opening the joints to get everything moving so it can flow out?
Yes. I'm really big into physical movement, body movement. I'm a Kundalini. I got certified in Kundalini yoga. All that, everything's a yes to that. Your body needs to move. Your body needs to be open, and any kind of tension is stored stress. And, we got to open up, and you can go through a process, even in a yoga class, you can have an amazing release. We store so much emotion in our hips, so much deep emotions in the root chakra. When you're in yin yoga and you're opening up your hips, you could easily start crying in the middle of a session. And the same things that you're doing in yin yoga, when I'm a massage therapist or I'm doing any kind of therapy, I'm trying to move your body in the same way that you'd be naturally doing in a yoga move or yoga posture, or just trying to get your body to open up the way it's supposed to. And that's what yoga is doing. It's trying to get you to open, expand yourself. So you're doing the same thing, where it's all body work. It's all energetic body work, and Pilates too. All of it, Kundalini yoga, amazing. So back to talk therapy, though. I can do talk therapy more now. Now I'm ready for it. Now, after the mental expansion and being able to articulate my feelings a little bit more and in my experiences, talk therapies. I did hypnotherapy, and psychotherapy for a little bit over a year. for a year, twice a week sometimes. And but then Kundalini yoga gets the energies moving and gets you really in tune with your breath. So you can do your own therapy and deep work and clear in your energetic field. And with talk therapy, that's where I'm at now. So I do all kinds of yoga. I do yoga at least every day. Once I usually do Pilates in the morning, yoga at night. I might miss sometimes, one or the other, and I usually try the studio I'm at now doesn't do Kundalini yoga, but I try to do some sort of mantra or some sort of breath work.
Hmm.
And then talk therapy, I don't shut up. So that's all we do.
So then if you don't shut up, I'm so curious about the hypnotherapy as well. So
I love
I
it.
always thought about myself that I couldn't be hypnotized because I have that mental dialogue all the time in my head, or monologue, right? But except for I'm a Gemini rising, so I guess it's a dialogue. It's two. But could you tell us a little bit about how you stumbled into hypnotherapy and just tell us about the process for you, what you worked on, or how it helped.
Hypnotherapy years ago, went to quit smoking. And I only took one session and I was done. So I don't know how I knew about that too. I just always knew where to go, where to find. I was always looking for woo stuff. I just love it. I just always was drawn to it. But when 2018, 2016, 17, and I would say I was on YouTube a lot more and I was looking up guided meditations, and I just always loved that kind of stuff. I mean, I was a massage therapist for 12 years, so I knew a lot about this kind of stuff. I'm around people that talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm in class and workshops with people who do these kind of practices. But YouTube, I took off with the astro projecting and these learning how to lucid dream and all this. And I already did that naturally. I just didn't have the words for it. I didn't know. I was just like, I thought I was having nightmares all the time, but I was leaving. We travel in our sleep. And when I got COVID messed with me. The mental fog, the depression, I lost my strength. It really hit me hard. And so I couldn't clear my head. And I also think it was a huge awakening too, on a whole nother level. I think we were all going through some sort of upgrade, and it got me so in tune with myself. I had to heal myself because nobody would take me seriously because I didn't get the shot. I didn't do any of that. So I had to find my own process. And it's one of those things. I was like, I always will go into like this prayer or, be like, where's my guide? Where's my next person? Where's my teacher? And that's been more so the past 10 years, I think, than anything. When I was younger, they used to show up. And then I'm online and I look up and there's Shannon, hypnosis right in the area I was at. And I called her and I was like, I know you're for me. She's like, all right, you're coming in. I didn't know she was transpersonal. I didn't know she was as woo-woo as I was. I thought she was a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist. I thought I was going crazy with COVID and all the weird stuff that was happening to me the past few years, with the dreams and just so much crap that I just was like, what the hell's wrong? I thought I was going insane. Right. And so I walked into her office and was like, I just need you to fix it. I need to know I'm okay. I need to know I'm not crazy. If I am, you're going to send me to a psychiatrist or whatever. I don't care. This is COVID put me in a deep, dark place. And so I will say this though, when you go to hypnosis, because I'm an overthinker, talker like you too. But the one thing I'm really good at is setting intentions. I'm really strong with my intentions. Everything is about the intention you set before you do anything. So when I walked in her office, my intention was, you're clearing my head. I basically looked at her and said, you are clearing my head and you are giving me a reset. And I'm really giving myself a reset. I'm just throwing it out there. And I'm like, and this is going to work. And so that's what I did. I went in there and every single time we went through my limiting beliefs. We just would go through, we would reprogram my mind. We would talk and just keep going and going and going until I was on my new story. And that was it. It works. It's basically, they're just guiding you to reprogram your own mind. But you've got to choose to say, I'm done with this story. I want to see change. And I'm already ruminating, and it's a pattern. So we're addicted to our own patterns. But the hypnosis can give you signs and things to do that will help you break your pattern. There's nothing crazy about it. It's a tool, and you're always awake during it. You go into a deep place, but you don't have to go super deep either. You can be as awake as you need to be awake. You're always in charge. And I even took a certification on the hypnosis. And so it's like, I always have to do that. I got a list. I got a scroll full of certifications. But it was one of the best resets because she helped me clear my mind and get focused. And that's where I left for my road trip. I finally got up and was like, I had so much fear. Fear took over me during COVID because pre me getting sick, when COVID happened, isolation, that put me in a post-traumatic episode. I would call them episodes. And so throughout every chapter of my life, it just seemed like one more thing was added to the Big Bang. But I believe this is all part of my awakening. And then when you have a post-traumatic episode, you kind of explode, and then you end up landing rock bottom again, and you got to build yourself back up. Whereas something similar could have happened to somebody else, and they can't see why I fell apart, or what happened. But it's like everything explodes out. You can't contain it anymore. And so that's what I was building myself back up from, and then got sick. So the road trip came as I'm out of that chapter. I'm going into the next chapter. Get me the hell out of here.
So I have questions about the road trip, but just before we do, I want to know what's on the scroll. Like, what is in your bag of tricks? What is it you can do? What is it? And also, just to add to that, what's on the other scroll of things you want to learn and gifts you want to sort of develop more that maybe you haven't had a chance to yet?
My journey has been a shamanic journey. I've always known that I was going to end up in the healing arts some way or another, because even when I was married and I was a graphic designer, and we did environmental designs. We had a really cool lifestyle. We did all the rock carvings, the exhibits, and Disney, the zoos, museums. I did all that kind of concrete carving and painting. And but during that time, I would always pick up a book on Reiki. I could see my ex-husband laughing at me because I'd be like, "Can you feel it? Can you get?" I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and this was before I even knew, I was like, running. I was really into health, running and stuff like that to try and heal and be healthy. But I wanted to so bad find my way into the healing arts. And I signed up for a school years ago where they online, I can't even find them. I thought about this the other day. They sent me a bunch of books on all, sound healing, all this, you name it, everything that you can think of in this field. And I would go through and take the little test, but I had no clue. I was just doing the book stuff, I was like early 20s. But after our divorce is when it all happened, though. Like, I finished school when I was married for graphics and web design and things like that. And then when we got divorced, I went to massage therapy. And that's when I started the Reiki, the craniosacral, the cupping. I wanted to go back to acupuncture school. I didn't end up doing that. But I mean, for years, like I said, the craniosacral therapy. I did reflexology, anything you can think of that we add to the whole tool bag of massage therapy. But I wanted to go on the shamanic journey, though. I wanted to know more. So I've taken shamanic journey in. I've worked with different people. And on the road trip, I met up with a shaman, and I worked with her, and did all the workshops with her so I could do shamanic healing with people. And I was like, I looked at her and she looked at me, and I'm like, she goes, I've been a shaman for over 20 years. And she's like, everything you're teaching about manifesting and everything Joe Dispenza teaches is basically everything shamanism. And it's just shamanism has a lot of cool ways to do all the journeying and all the inner work and inner world stuff. But it's not, I just learned on that. I learned from her that it's, we don't have to go down that path if we don't want to. Like there's an easier way to get to that whole. So now I'm kind of lost. I'm like, I got to the shaman end and I'm like, and now I don't need it anymore. So I don't know what else I want to learn because I did the hypnosis too. I want to help people reprogram their minds. I still want to do that. I just tend to take on so much at once, and want to do everything at once. But I can't right now. I feel like my list of certifications and everything I've done, it's like the learning period is you never stop learning. Don't ever stop learning. But I feel like I've gone through the university and now it's time for me to figure out how I'm going to piece all of it together. And now it's teach, now it's do, now it's work with it. Now it's level up, and now it's really transform, right? So it's like, it feels like that chapter of all that learning is over, and I don't know what's next. I don't know what's next because I figured, it's almost like I figured it. I found that truth. I found that path. And so I don't know what's next.
So then the road trip, obviously you've told us sort of what happened just before you went on that trip, but tell us about the trip. I mean, how transformative was that for you? How scary was it to sort of go, right, I'm off? I know you said that you have led a very nomadic life anyway, but how difficult was it to sort of uproot and just go? And also, last part of this question, did you have a plan when you packed up?
No. So I had Costa Rica on my whiteboard. I always had a magic whiteboard. Anything I wrote on it, normally I would get somehow. And Costa Rica came up when I was in Kundalini. I was getting certified for Kundalini yoga. And I was like, oh, God, here's my chance. And I was sick that whole year getting certified. And so I saved up during that time because I couldn't work for a few months as a massage therapist. And my channel wasn't monetizing enough for me to be comfortable enough. And so I saved up for the trip. And then my therapist was like, I was going to Costa Rica in February, and it was November when I left before February. So she was like, you just got to go. And I remember saying to myself, I set a date, October. I stopped working as a massage therapist. I looked at my channel, and I was teaching manifesting through my readings and doing a little bit of coaching. And I said to myself, I've got to prove that the universe is always working out in my favor, and that everything is always gonna show up for me. And so that's why I just up and left. Like one of my mods was gonna have me staying at her place, but something happened at that place. And so very last minute, 2 days before I was gonna leave, I had no place to go in Texas. And all of a sudden I'd look up Airbnb. There was a really, small place that was affordable. I never did that before. I was like, oh, I didn't know there was Airbnb living. I always went to hotels, I just didn't think that. So I'm like, that worked out. Then just so everything kept working out. I never knew exactly where I was going to go next, but I would land somewhere in Tucson, and the person I was staying there, he was like, hey, I'll give this place to you this long. So when you go to Costa Rica, you can come back here, stay here for a little bit longer. Then my son's place opened up. He didn't know he was going to go to Norway. He's like, Mom, I need somebody here at the house. You can come stay here. I started talking to Anne. We were going at that time, my friend I met in Costa Rica, Natalia, who does the sound healing, was up in Oregon, was like, come on up here for the summer. And that's where I did the shaman work. And she's the sound healer. She does her videos on my channel. And I just keep making connections And that's what I love to do. I love to meet people. My life is about who I'm experiencing things with. It's kind of like when I'm looking at the crafts that I've been doing lately with my friend Brian from high school. It's like, it's the experiences, the people I'm meeting, and the things that I'm doing. And that's what that whole trip was about, was what I was experiencing, and also following the energies of what was going on in the patterns. And I will say that I'm grateful for Anne, especially when the timing you came in, but for you to being as intellectual as you are, being able to bring words and articulate what I was going through throughout the whole time, and knowing that you've experienced it somewhat with me, help me connect kind of the dots even now, so you meet everybody for a reason. And that's the part, it gives me the chills. I just got the chills. I love meeting people. I love the
Yeah.
experiences. And
Well, when you leave yourself open to being able to meet people and to go where you're feeling pulled also, it's so rare. And as you're talking about it, and I'm getting goosebumps also when you talk about it, but it's just like it makes me think about how the whole world at this point, right? So you're coming out of that world where everything had been shut down, and people were so inculcated with fear about other people that your antidote or reaction to it was sort of, I'm getting out there. It's
yeah.
amazing that you even thought of it, I think.
Well, that's how I've been my entire life. Like when I was a kid, I up and left and went to Kansas on a Greyhound to go see my family out there. And people, like, I was only 15. When I was 6 or 7, I meet friends everywhere, just go wherever. I always explored. COVID and that PTSD explosion I had put me in such a dark place that I had forgotten who I was, and forgotten how I love to just get out there and explore. And that's how I meet people. I have friends everywhere, like superficial, but friends, acquaintances everywhere I go. And I needed to do that again so I could remember who I was, because COVID did lock us all down. And it did something to a lot of us, especially people with, traumatized people who didn't even have trauma, a lot of trauma. It just traumatized people. And so, yeah, that road trip was like spitting me back out there so that I would have to face my fears again. And I don't even know where some of those fears came from. It was just, but then learning how to trust. I have to be able to trust the universe and trust that everything's going to work out for me, especially if I'm telling people in my readings, trust that everything is going to work out for you. I have to experience that. And there were times when I just didn't know how something was going to work out. And everything, even coming back home, even with the shift that happened when I came back home, everything still is working out. And we can choose to fight it or push it or whatever, but I just keep kind of going with the flow, like I keep telling everybody. And I'm scared shitless sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what that flow is. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. But even Dave in one of his readings was like, this is not a time to find solutions. Let the solutions come to you. And that is what I had to really learn. And also in the meantime, you learn too who you can connect with, and who the whole thing with changing relationships and equal give and take and things like that, and learning who's really your ride or dies, or learning who really is true to their path, true to their calling. Going back to what you was saying earlier about people that just kind of, we were saying, read a book and say they're walking the walk, but they're not really walking the walk. They're talking the talk, but not walking the walk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Frankie, I'm so curious. So I have a tendency to meet people on my journey and go, we're going to be friends. I did it with Anne. I've done it with other people in my life. And it's what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And they don't get a say in it. But when I have met, and I'm not going to name any names with this, because I've met some people that were incredible teachers for me. Incredible in the way that they transfer that knowledge. And I'm in awe of that. And then I'm like, well, we're going to be friends, because I love having people that inspire me in my life every day. And a number of times I have become their friend, and where, a lot of us are still friends to this day. But what I've discovered when I get there is that very often they don't walk the walk. They're just very good at transferring that information. And I think there's a place in the world for those types of people, because if they're giving other people the tools to be able to develop their gifts, heal their traumas, just evolve as a soul, I think that's an incredible and powerful gift. But I also learned there have been times since where I've met people that I go, you are such a wonderful teacher. I don't want to know you beyond being my teacher, because I don't want to ruin the illusion. And I love so much hearing that you've made such a conscious effort to walk the walk.
Yeah. Well, I agree with everything you're saying, though, too, because I have called in people. I've met people and been like, I did this to one of my friends in New Hampshire. You're my best friend. And we ended up being best friends. And she had a lot to teach me, though, too. We both taught each other, and she turned out not to be my best friend. But I love that experience because we taught each other so much. And then there are people, but I understand deeply now, people are a reflection too, so it doesn't matter how they're showing up for us. We are learning. Everybody is here to help us learn, flourish, and grow. We're all teachers. We're all teaching each other everything, whether it's teaching us to stand more in our truth, or to open up to other possibilities and perspectives. That's why I've learned not to judge where you're at. You might be you might be talking the talk and not walking the walk, but I still do believe, because you're talking about it, you're calling it in. It'll hit you at some point. You'll have to do your work at some point. But then I do believe there are people that this is where there's so many avenues in the spiritual world, the spiritual community. Like, are there people that really are just not going to wake up? Are there people that are just here to live a certain path? But that's their journey too. So who's to say they didn't come in here and just say, I want to be asleep. I don't want to deal with that shit.
Well, Dolores Cannon has talked about that. There are people that had such a traumatic life, in the last lifetime, that they come to this life to have an easy life, to not do any work, just to be here and be a part of it. And that is literally it. And next life, well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that too. I mean, I have friends that they're comfortable with just what they're doing in their everyday life, and they don't want nothing to do with the weird stuff I talk about. They have no, they look so happy. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I wish I could go back to that, where I didn't even, know what I know now. But once you know what you know, you can't go back. And I just think this is where I do think, I believe that we chose a path for a reason. And then I get stuck. I stump myself, though, because sometimes I'm like, the quantum physics, though, makes so much sense to me. Everything's here now. And then how did we write our path? Like, all the truths lead to the same, or I'm making the connections. There's so much truth in all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that maybe this is the time where we should start with our famous 4 questions that we end our shows with. So we're going to start wrapping things up with our questions. So Frankie, this is the first one. What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? Everything. I love humor. I like people who are super goofy and funny. My kids make me laugh all the time with their jokes, making, I love Jim Carrey type stuff. Remember old Jim Carrey? So I'm really big on humor. I love when people make me laugh. Jokes, good jokes.
And who was your biggest spiritual influence?
Who was my biggest spiritual influence? That's a good one. I would say, I mean, I don't want to be corny and be like, God, I really connected with God, but Mother Teresa, I love Mother Teresa. I love something about her. There was something about her that I love. And Virgin Mary really connected with. I actually called them before I came in, but when we got on YouTube, I would say Neville Goddard and Florence Scovel-Shinn and Joe Dispenza. I really connect with them, and I connect with that path. I wasn't a big Abraham Hicks. I could watch her sometimes, listen to her sometimes. Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer was one of my very first, actually. I don't even know how I didn't even pick up on that one. Definitely him. So that's about it. I didn't have any major like epiphany before YouTube, you know.
Great. So I think we've kind of been talking about this, but this is your chance to sum it all up. What would be your advice to people about how to avoid or escape fear?
Avoid or escape it. I don't think you can escape. I mean, you just have to face it. One of the things that resonates with me is like, if you're afraid to do it, do it. You know, if it's when you're making a choice about something, we always tend to go with what we're most comfortable with, but you want to try and go with the thing that scares you the most, you know, and facing the fears. I've feared so much. I fear so much. I deal with fear all the time. I think that's a Scorpio thing. Say the question again.
What would your advice be to people about how to not dwell in fear, really, right?
Not dwell in fear.
To move beyond it.
You just got to face it. I've almost, I love water, and I've almost drowned, and I still, every single time, I'm like, I'm not going to let that stop me from getting in that water. So it's determination, it's perseverance, it's fighting it so that you don't let it win. You don't want it to take over. That's probably a topic that we could probably dive in. That shouldn't be a closing question.
Well, it's not the last one, but
that's like an opening question.
Well,
And then
that's our trick. We make you want to come back to talk about something.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
So that will be the topic for the next episode that we do. So who was your what was your best piece of spiritual advice you've ever been given?
What was the best spiritual advice that I've ever been given? Well, I don't know offhand. I say all my advice comes through in my readings, and now I'm stumped. I think one of the things we were just saying, everybody's here to help us heal, flourish, or grow. One of my spiritual teachers in the Kundalini school would say that all the time. And I think that's something that has stuck with me because it helps me deal with the people that have hurt me. And so when I tap into that and I listen to her saying that to us all the time, I can remember that, everybody's always doing the best that they know how. Everybody, no matter what, is always, even in our worst decisions, we're always doing the best we think we know we're doing. So I've got to kind of always focus on that when I'm getting hurt. I've been hurt a lot. Is that they're just doing the best that they think they know that they can, or that they know how to at the moment. And if we can remember that with people, I think it'll be easier to let go of some of the things people do that they don't know they're doing to you to hurt you. That's one of the things that I've gotten through when people have hurt. It reminds me that they're just a soul trying to get through this journey as well, and their soul, deep soul, probably didn't mean to do it. You just got to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I got that. I found it.
Well, that was wonderful advice, and this was a great talk. I feel like there's so much that we barely scratched the surface,
Yeah.
so we will have future conversations, I'm sure. And I know that we didn't even tell everybody everything about you, so people can find you at Frankie's Tarot on YouTube. Also, you're starting an Etsy shop, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Kind of I'm still piecing it together. It's one of those things. This is where the Gemini influence comes in, I think. I got these creative ideas and I start them, but that is something. I'm working on little candle boxes, making candles, and I love to carve and sculpt, and but I'm trying to do too much at once. And but that is, I got candle boxes, I got little oval boxes. My friend's a carpenter; he makes all these things, and we're putting I make stuff. I put in it soulmate boxes and crystals and things like that. So more will come as we go, but I'm trying to find my way back to my art side. I'm a sculpt. I sculpted for years. That's why massage therapy was so good for me. And to carve and paint. And I just want to bring that part back into my life again. After my divorce, I think I shut it down for a long time. And then healing arts became my creative expression. So yeah, my Etsy shop, we've got, like, this is what I was showing you, the little wood flowers that my friend Brian makes. And I had one of my viewers made this logo on the cup, which is going to be on the
beautiful.
candle. I don't have the boxes in front of me right now, but they're beautiful cherry shaker style boxes, and I made the candles to put in it. But I want to get more creative and sculpt candles and get some cool things in it. But that's part of my next. We'll see what happens. Maybe if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, on to the next. I don't know.
Well, I will make sure in the description below that we have all of the links so that people can find you easily, because your tarot channel is amazing. And just before Anne wraps everything up, I did want to just remind people that we have an Instagram page. We have just started a Facebook page, the Gemini Rising Show, on both platforms. And we are going to be back next Tuesday at 2 p.m. with Krista Marie, who had a near-death experience. So we're going to be delving into that, which I think will be amazing. So I just wanted to let everyone know what's going on and coming up for the Gemini Rising Show.
Great, thank you. And also you can always find Natalie and I on High Vibe TV, so be sure you check that out. And Frankie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Can't wait for part 2.
There's so much. I tried to do my best to stay as organized as I could. There's just so many avenues.
No, it was great. Perfect. And thanks to everyone in the chat who joined us as well. And come back next week.
All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.